Welcome to Rappaport Connect's Alumni Spotlights, where we interview notable Rappaport Foundation alumni. My name is Sean Horrigan. Today we are joined by 2023 Rappaport Center for Law and Public Policy Fellow Linda McClellan. Linda McClellan, thank you for joining us today for Rappaport Connect's Alumni Spotlights.
Thank you for having me.
Linda, why don't we get started by talking about your path to becoming an attorney. So I know in a previous life, you were a clinical therapist. How has that training served you as a law student? And can you share with us what inspired you to become an attorney?
Absolutely. So, funnily enough, understanding people really helps you when dealing with people in the law and in law school. There's a lot of things that I have learned as a therapist. I specialized in a DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, though I was not licensed in it. And that basically is how to deal with the outside world and how it makes you feel. So I've used those skills to try to regulate myself when, dealing with a cold call, the lovely Socratic method, being able to just handle law school. And it's also helped me with understanding cases on a different level. For example, I can always think of this one case that my professor for crim law was talking about where it dealt with domestic abuse and arson and setting someone on fire. And the whole argument was the man accidentally set the woman on fire. So since he did not have the mens rea, he could not be charged with this is how long it's been. Couldn't be charged with the charge, basically, for crim law. We all went through that, and my professor was just like, this is clearly a case about domestic violence. It just helps with adding that second layer of recognition and what's really going on in a case, because sometimes people just look at that black and white and they think that's all that's happening, but there's always a nuance. There's a lot of gray. And with leading to becoming hopefully a lawyer as I graduate this May and take the bar in July. I used to be a case manager, social worker, and I worked with the population of adults that were low income, unhoused, no medical care, things like that. And I went to prisons and jails a lot to see clients, and I saw how the system was really letting people down. It wasn't caring for the populations that needed it the most. And I just wanted to do that and really do something with policy and legislation to help those at-risk populations.
Linda, I know that you are a student at New England Law Boston, and you are a recipient of the Sandra Day O'Connor Full Tuition Scholarship. Congratulations. That's wonderful. That is a full ride through your career at New England Law. When did you learn that you were receiving this honor, and what has it meant to you for your time at New England Law?
It's funny dealing with that honor because it's felt like something at some times and felt like nothing at other times. The biggest thing is I love not paying a tuition bill. Cannot turn that down. That was the main thing that got me to come to Boston because I'm originally from Philadelphia. The cool thing about it is that I've gotten to meet the younger students, or like younger in 1L, 2L years, that are also recipients of the scholarship and in the program. And just offering them a mentor or someone that, has gone through some things or is currently trying to figure out things, and just giving them another person that they can turn to, because law school can feel like a very lonely place. And I know that I've definitely used it for networking purposes to just provide a network to other people who may really need it.
I know that you are the executive editor of the New England Law Review. You're a very busy lady. Tell us about some of the topics the Law Review covers and what your role is like as editor.
Oh, okay. So that is the thing that takes up majority of my time, honestly, more than classes. So I'm the executive online editor, which basically means, in a nutshell, I handle everything that's online. I do all the online publications. I help pick the submissions. I create things. I manage the website. Anything digital that's not social media is something I'm in charge of. So our law review, New England Law Review, it covers a wide breadth of topics. We've had everything from student comments dealing with criminal law. We have a upcoming publication dealing with Ticketmaster and the ticket gouging, I would like to call it, though obviously the author can say that better than me. And then we have an upcoming symposium that's dealing with intellectual property. We have a podcast that's underneath me that is called On Remand, and introduce different topics that are currently happening because we have a faculty blog as well. We recently just had an episode be published that deals with Professor Elliot Trace and his current submission to the faculty blog about book bans and LGBTQA people. So we have a lot that we cover in just that one aspect of being the online person. So I really enjoy it. And also it's great to be able to just create things and see it. Like I've learned how to code. So it's just been a really good way to expand everything. And I really enjoy seeing my work product like on a day-to-day basis. And now I'm training my replacement because May is coming. And it's just great seeing my successor be able to grow into this role himself and be able to make it his own once he takes my spot.
Linda, you are a 2023 Rappaport Fellow. Tell us about how you learned about the fellowship and what your experience was like as a fellow.
Oh man, I loved being a fellow. That was probably one of my favorite things that has happened during my entire law school career. I learned about the Rapport Fellow when I was actually a 1L. I applied, did not get an interview. So I was a little upset, but I was like, that's how it goes. It worked out. I got another internship, and that led to a variety of amazing things that I'm really grateful for. And then I tried again my 2L year, but funnily enough, I got the notification that the application was due the next day. And I was like, I guess I'll try. I'm probably not going to get it. So, to my surprise, when they emailed me for an interview, I was like, this is amazing. So, I really have enjoyed it. Lissy, who's in charge of the Law Fellows, she's amazing, a force to be reckoned with, someone I heavily admire and inspire to be one day. So that's someone who has definitely shaped the Rappaport experiences. I couldn't imagine it without her. But I know how I originally heard of it was an email, something as simple as that. I was one of those 1Ls who subscribed to everything. I went to every networking event, Massachusetts Black Lawyers Association, Boston Bar Association, Women's Bar Association, Massachusetts Black Women Attorneys Association, like everything. If I was in that, genre of person, I signed up for it. The Massachusetts LGBTQA Bar Association. I have so many emails from bar associations, but they tend to tell you what's going on. And I had gotten an email that was like, hey, there's this fellowship, the Rappaport Fellowship. And I was like, I definitely would love to know about this because one, it deals with public service and government, which is everything I care about. And two, it's paid, which as someone in public service and government, you often don't get that opportunity. But the Rappaport experience was just amazing from top to bottom. Meeting with the other fellows who are some of my really close friends now, being able to meet so many amazing people because we had the Thursday events where we would go and we got to meet Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. We got to meet the acting U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy, Mayor Wu, just having the opportunity to meet people that I would never have had the opportunity before. And of course, the job itself was amazing. I worked in the governor's office, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, underneath the Cabinet Affairs and Policy Division. And I actually got to work directly underneath a Rappaport alumni, Cecilia Organze Baldwin, who was also a New England Law alumni. So it was just really great to be able to do different things every single day.
I love hearing about people's experience as a fellow and how they learned about it. In terms of all your networking events, is that something you would recommend to future law students and future fellows is to attend these networking events and get out and meet colleagues?
Yes, 100%. I would definitely not be where I am if it was not for luckily being a very social person. Understand everyone has different social batteries, and some of my closest friends, my partner is an introvert, so definitely getting them to go out to stuff is a little bit more of a challenge than it is for me. But I always like to tell the story of how I got my internship where I was at the state senator Lydia Edwards, interning underneath her for my 2L year. I was at Greater Boston Legal Services in the summer for the Quarry and Reentry Unit underneath Pauline Curion. And Pauline cares a lot about legislation and policy with criminal reform, which is something I focus on. And I was lobbying on behalf of the Clean Slate Bill. And I was going around talking to people, and I live actually in State Senator Lydia Edwards' district. So they were like, go talk to her. You have to. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll talk to anyone. And I met with her chief of staff and just had a conversation with him. And he said, you're a law student? I said, yes. He said, do you have an internship next year? And I'm like, not yet. And he said, "Would you like to meet for coffee? Send me your resume." Sent him my resume. He asked me for coffee and offered me the job. And that's how I got into that. So you never know who you'll meet, who you can help or might be able to help you. I try really hard to pay it forward. Now, being an older law student that's going to these events and soon to be an ex law student, you never know who you might be able to help. And I've also made great friendships. And I don't like when people go to a networking event and view it as what can I get from it?
Mhm.
Well, obviously, law students, we're all just climbing and trying our best to survive. So I can't fault anyone for it. But it's good to look at those as a way to learn and grow and also just connect with others. And that's what will come from receiving opportunities that you may have never heard from before. Because unfortunately, it is a lot of who you know to be able to get certain things. But you have to know what you're talking about to be able to talk to who you know. So classes are still important.
Well, good for you for putting yourself out there. It sounds like the timing was perfect with Lydia Edwards' office, so that worked out wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. You mentioned Corey. You are the training and legal resource coordinator for the Corey Initiative. You work with Corey volunteers to seal and expunge criminal records. Can you tell us a little bit about what Corey is, what it stands for those who might not be familiar with it, and what it means to seal and expunge a criminal record? And what other types of trainings have you created for Corey?
Absolutely. So CORI stands for Criminal Offender Record Information. So basically it's a criminal record. And what I do is I train all the volunteers on how to seal, how to expunge, how that works, because Massachusetts is very finicky when it comes to their legislation with sealing criminal records. And I also have created a trauma informed interviewing training that we do that teaches volunteers, obviously, not how to be therapists because I am not licensed to teach others how to do that. I am not a professor. But it basically teaches volunteers on how to ask some questions more sensitively and in a more client powered approach. People who have dealt with the criminal justice system, whether they have been convicted or non convicted, that can be a very traumatizing experience. And the last thing we want to do when we're trying to help people is re traumatize them because, first off, it's not cool to re-traumatize people, just a pretty good rule of law. But secondly, when we're doing these, we have something called a interview. Like we do an intake and we do an interview to be able to get information, see how we can help them. If someone is dealing with a trauma and they are uncomfortable, they're not going to open up and tell you what's going on. You're not going to get the information you need to be able to assist them. So I decided to create the trauma informed interviewing basics training, and it's been going really well because it also helps volunteers feel more comfortable and confident when asking these questions. And some questions can be as simple as, if it's dealt with substance abuse history, if it's dealt with domestic violence history, if it's just dealt with incarceration history. It just helps to know that the client feels safe and empowered while dealing with these questions because a lot of people who deal with criminal records deal with a lot of judgment. And the last thing we want is for people to feel judged while they're working with us. So that's probably my crowning jewel of trainings that I've created. There is a recording of me that will live on forever as the training for them after my time. But the other thing that I do at the Corey Initiative is I created the Policy Initiative, which is a branch underneath it that deals with legislation, specifically with criminal justice reform and recidivism. So we will partner with other organizations and be able to lobby on their behalf with what legislation they are trying to get passed within the legislature. We have done things such as write amicus briefs to the Supreme Judicial Court. We've also have recently testified on behalf of the Clean Slate Act in front of the legislation. I did that with my deputy, Damian Wilson, which was really great. So it's just amazing to be able to teach other people in the policy initiative things about legislation, about policy that we don't have a class that teaches us on how to do it. So that's what I basically have tasked myself with doing is to give that information because information is power. And when they have that information, that's what's creating all these new students who have that same, fire for change and understand how to implement or try to implement the change on a more government background.
Fantastic. That's a area I'm very passionate about because I believe that we recriminalize folks once they get out of jail, and just there's so many barriers for people on so many different levels. So I think the work that you're doing is really fantastic.
Thank you.
And what was it like testifying in front of the legislator?
Oh, that was interesting because I've seen people testify before, but I had never done it myself. And anyone can do it. Even if you just show up that day and sign up, you can do it like right there. There's no barrier for it, which is good and interesting at the same time. However, it was multifaceted because we spoke on behalf of what we see while sealing criminal records. We've had clients who aren't able to get jobs, aren't able to get housing, have a stigma. They can't move on with their lives from something that may have happened many, many years ago. Or in some cases, never happened at all. It's a non-conviction that'll still affect their lives because it still creates a quarry. And the other side of that was understanding that while I'm advocating on behalf of this population, I am not this population. I have not lived it. So I don't ever want to speak over another voice. So it was to make sure to be like, hey, these are things I know as a volunteer, as a student who's been doing this for 3 years, who knows a lot about the ins and outs of this specific process. And this is affecting real people who have the right to live, and their voices matter, and you should listen to them just as intently as you're listening to me, because a lot of times people will view education as a right, which it is, but it's not treated as a right. It's a privilege, and will look at people with education and give them a bigger platform and listen to their voices more. But when it comes to things like this, like a criminal record, the voice of someone who's lived it is more important than the voice of me who understands how to seal it, because you need to hear about how it's affecting their lives. So balancing those two things was really important, and staying within the time limit and not tripping over my words. Those were all the things I was really thinking about during the time of the testifying.
I'm sure you were fantastic at it. I also read that you were on the New England Law Mental Health and Wellness Committee. What typical mental health issues do you see law students facing, and how did your committee go about addressing some of those issues?
Oh gosh, there is a world of mental health difficulties that law students deal with. The biggest one I definitely saw when just like meeting with other students and doing like talking groups where people just felt safe to share how they're feeling, and see others like are in the same community feeling the same way. A lot of intrusive thoughts, a lot of self-deprecating, a lot of second guessing, and imposter syndrome. My 1L year, I'm part of the Black Law Students Association. We actually had a whole thing about imposter syndrome and had a speaker come and talk about it, because that's something that very much affects everybody, but especially students of color, first generation students, students of lower income. So there was two main things I did as the chair of mental health and wellness committee my 2L year. One was the creation and running of a food pantry at New England Law for students who had dealt with food scarcity. So I did everything from training volunteers on how to do that, doing the orders, prepping it, making sure it was clean, everything that exists for a food pantry. But also I created this program my 1L year called Brain Hacks, which was essentially just trying to give students skills to be able to deal with those intrusive thoughts, that anxiety. One that I always teach, that I've actually gone to 1L classes and taught just as a regular person, is called square breathing. It is a way to regulate when you're dealing with anxiety, because anxiety is a physical symptom. It's something going on in your body. And square breathing, which is breathe in for 5 seconds, hold breath for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds, and hold no breath for 5 seconds. That helps just regulate everything going on in your body and focusing on your breath. So that's something you can do in the middle of class without, everyone knowing what's going on, because you do have that right to privacy. So that was my 1L year. I had that. And then my 2L year, we did goal planning. We talked about, recognizing these thoughts and how to combat them, and just really giving the support to the student body by letting them know what services exist. I also assisted our sobriety support group for people who are interested in sobriety or sober living. I created a panel of attorneys who are, dealing with mental health recovery or sobriety or substance abuse recovery and how they navigate that while being in the legal field and being successful. And we had 4 amazing panelists, one from Attorney General's office, one from the trial courts, one from Morrison and Mahoney. We had an amazing group. And the best thing was that students felt safe to share their concerns and their questions. And that was just something that I was always grateful that I was able to give to my community while I'm here.
I was struck by you're starting the food pantry. This is my own ignorance, but I would never have thought that there would be a need for something like that on a law school campus. That's really amazing. And did you find that they had a lot of visitors, and what was the response to that?
It was interesting because a lot of students that would have benefited from it felt that they had no right to take from it.
Mm.
They were the ones that were like, oh, I really could use the rice, but I don't really what if someone else needs it more? And I'm like, no, this is meant for all students, first off. But second of all, if you could use it, take it. And then on the flip side, students who may have had a little bit more entitlement within them were the first to grab a bunch of stuff and leave not much for others. So it was interesting to see those 2 sides because that's something we see a lot in regular society is the 2 sides of people who take a lot and don't leave for others, and then people who don't take any because they want to leave some for others. So that was very interesting to see that happening in kind of a microorganism of a law school, because my law school, again, is also on the smaller side. It's only a law school. It's not a university.
And would students and staff donate the food to the pantry? Okay.
Yes, we had donations from professors, from students. We actually had a little area where people could just donate food besides the food that we would order, because the goal of the food pantry for the food we would order would be food that could be eaten on campus.
Mhm.
So it would be like little snack packs, anything that could be in a microwave because we had microwaves there, anything non-perishable, granola bars, just so if you were studying during finals when we are all losing our mind and you don't even feel like you can leave the school to get a snack, here's something at the food pantry to help you, because that can be detrimental to your brain. Food is pretty important. And unfortunately, as law students, we definitely put our well-being, both mental and physical, kind of in the back burner when we are dealing with the stress of the academia side of law school.
Well, Linda, you are a force to be reckoned with. You are so impressive. All that you do and all that you juggle is really amazing. I can't wait to see what comes next for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Tell us a little bit about your current internship.
So I currently am interning underneath the Chief Justice Kim Budd at the SJC. I'm working underneath her clerks, and it's just great to work under such an amazing woman and underneath such really, really talented clerks and learn so much from them. I get to see different sides of the law. I get to hear oral arguments, and just obviously can't say too much because a lot of things are privacy shrouded. Just being able to constantly be immersed in different things really helps you grow.
Well, thank you for sharing so much today and sharing your experience. And I'm hoping your story inspires other future fellows and anyone who's considering a career in law. So thank you so much for sharing and joining today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you thinking of me and taking the time to talk to me.